The first scream barely made it past the wind. It was thin, cracked by panic, and swallowed by the rustle of pine trees. Evening light was falling fast across the lake, that strange, quiet hour when sound carries and hearts race for no reason. A fishing rod lay snapped on the dock. A trail of footprints half slid into the water. Then came another scream, desperate, smaller this time, followed by the violent splash of something alive fighting to breathe. Across the shore, porch lights flickered but no one moved. A mother's voice had the wrong kind of break in it. The kind that says this isn't just fear, this is final. And yet, the world seemed deaf, until a sharp bark cut through the dusk. It wasn't just sound, it was instinct made flesh. A German shepherd broke through the reeds, claws tearing through wet mud, fur streaked with water and gold. He didn't hesitate, didn't wait for help. He dove. The lake swallowed him whole. A flash of muscle, motion, and courage, and in that second, silence met its match. That was the night no one could forget. The night when everyone ignored her screams, until he didn't. Your support keeps us going. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. The lake never looked dangerous. On most days it was a mirror, soft blue and glassy, cradled by pine and stillness. Emma liked to watch the ripples form when Lily threw stones, tiny circles widening until they vanished, as if the water swallowed everything, sound, sorrow, even time itself. It had been that way since her husband, Daniel, passed 2 years ago. He had loved this lake, had promised it would always be their safe place. But safety, Emma had learned, was fragile. It could shatter with one sound. A scream, a splash, a breath too late. Lily was 6, full of those endless questions that only children have. The kind that hurt because they touch the edges of truth. "Mommy, do you think Daddy can see us from the clouds?" she would ask, holding her tiny hands around her face like binoculars. Emma always smiled, saying, "Of course, baby. He never misses a thing." But sometimes, when the night grew quiet and the stars refused to blink, she wondered if Daniel was still watching, or if grief had made her invent that comfort. Rex was the only constant other than Lily. He wasn't theirs, not officially. He belonged to Hank, their widowed neighbor, an old Marine with slow speech and hands that trembled when he poured coffee. Hank called Rex his shadow, though the dog often wandered into Emma's yard, tail wagging low, as if he knew they needed him more. His coat was a mix of sun and smoke, golden brown with streaks of charcoal, eyes like tarnished amber. He didn't bark much, didn't beg for attention. He simply existed beside you, solid, unshakable, like the earth itself. That summer had been unusually hot, the kind that made the air hum. Cicadas screamed from the trees, and the lake smelled of moss and rain. Lily spent her days chasing dragonflies barefoot, Rex always a few steps behind. Emma had started painting again on the porch, losing herself in color, trying to turn silence into art. There was something healing about the rhythm, brush, breath, wind. For a while, the world felt stitched back together. But that day, that one day, came with a stillness too deep, the kind that precedes a storm. The sky was a faded white, clouds heavy like unspoken words. Hank had gone into town, leaving Rex to roam as usual. Emma was making lemonade when she heard Lily's laughter drifting from the dock. Light, echoing, safe. She smiled. Then came a splash. A small one, playful, she thought. But then, silence. A silence that grew thick and wrong. She stepped outside, her hands wet from washing the counter, the screen door creaking behind her. "Lily," she called. The only answer was the hum of cicadas. Lily, louder now, heart pounding. The dock stood empty except for Rex, pacing, barking once. Twice, sharp, urgent. Then she saw it. The little red ball floating beyond reach, spinning slowly in the current. And that's when the scream tore through her. She ran, barefoot, breath breaking, lungs clawing for air. Lel. The name came out as a plea, as a prayer. The dock boards rattled under her weight, splinters biting into her feet. She reached the edge, and for a split second she saw nothing. Then, movement under the water, the flash of blonde hair, a small hand reaching toward nothing. The scream that came from Emma's throat didn't sound human. She dove. The cold hit her like fire, wrapping her in panic and mud. She clawed through the murky dark, her mind screaming her daughter's name again and again. But it was Rex who reached her first. A streak of fur and fury cut through the water beside her, bubbles exploding in his wake. She saw his head submerge, then resurface with something clutched between his teeth. Fabric, then skin, then the fragile curve of Lily's shoulder. Emma's body moved before thought could catch up. She grabbed her child, pulling, kicking, lungs burning. Together, woman and dog, they broke the surface. Air hit her chest like glass. She dragged Lily onto the dock, her hands trembling too hard to be sure of anything. Lily's face was pale, lips bluish. No, no, no. Emma pressed down on her chest, breath shallow, sobs cracking through every count. Please, baby, please. Rex stood beside them, dripping, shaking, whining, a low, broken sound that didn't belong to an animal but to something older, truer. His paw rested on Emma's arm as if to steady her. She looked at him through tears and saw the same desperation, the same will to fight. And then a cough, weak but real. Lily's chest heaved once, twice, and water spilled from her mouth. Emma collapsed forward, cradling her, sobbing into her wet hair. You're okay. You're okay? She didn't know how long they sat there. Minutes, hours. The world had folded into three beings on a dock: a mother, a child, and a dog who had done the unthinkable. By the time Hank came running, breathless and pale, Rex had already collapsed beside Lily. His breathing was shallow, his fur tangled with weeds. Emma looked at Hank with trembling eyes. He saved her, she whispered. Hank fell to his knees, running a rough hand through Rex's fur. Good boy, he murmured. Good damn boy. The ambulance came. Lights, sirens, voices, all distant, muffled, as if underwater. The town gathered along the road, faces pale in the flashing red. They had heard her screams but hadn't moved until it was too late. Their silence hung in the air, heavier than the storm. Days passed. Lily stayed in the hospital for 3 nights, fevered, coughing but alive. When she woke, her first words were, "Where's Rex?" Emma couldn't stop the tears that followed. "He's resting, baby," she said softly. "He's the reason you're here." Rex had developed a lung infection from the water. Hank brought him to the vet, visiting daily. The old man didn't say much, just sat beside him, whispering things no one else could hear. Emma came too, bringing Lily once she was strong enough. The moment Rex saw her, his tail thumped weakly against the blanket. Lily knelt, wrapping her arms around him. "You came for me," she whispered. When no one else did, the town tried to make amends. They sent flowers, food, words that sounded too late. But Emma wasn't angry, not anymore. Something about nearly losing everything strips away bitterness. She saw them differently now. Their hesitation born not from cruelty but fear. Everyone had their own ghosts. That didn't excuse their silence, but it made her understand it. Rex recovered slowly. He limped when he walked, wheezed when he ran. But his eyes were bright, and his loyalty only grew. Every morning, he waited at Emma's door until Lily came outside. They would sit together by the lake, quiet, watching the ripples spread. Sometimes Lily would toss a stick and Rex would chase it, but he never went far into the water again. Months passed. The leaves turned gold, the air crisp. The town held a small gathering by the lake, a new signpost carved from oak, in honor of Rex, the shepherd who listened. People stood in silence, hats held to their chests. Hank, leaning on his cane, placed his hand on Rex's head. "You did good, son," he said, voice breaking. "You did real good." Emma stepped forward, holding Lily's hand. She looked out over the lake. That same stretch of water that once held terror now glimmered under morning light. The surface rippled gently, as if bowing to the wind. Lily tugged her sleeve. "Mommy," she whispered, "can Daddy see Rex too?" Emma smiled through the ache in her chest.
"Oh, sweetheart,"
she said. "I think Daddy's been watching him all along." As the crowd dispersed, Emma lingered. Rex sat beside her, tail sweeping the leaves. She reached down, resting a hand on his fur, warm, alive, steady. The sun climbed higher, setting the lake ablaze with gold. There was no sound, no applause, just the quiet hum of life continuing. And for the first time in years, Emma didn't fear the silence. She understood it. Because sometimes, silence doesn't mean no one cares. Sometimes, it just means the right one hasn't heard you yet. The smell of lake water stayed in Emma's clothes for weeks. Metallic, earthy, impossible to wash away. Even after the doctors told her Lily would recover fully, she kept catching that scent on her hands. It was strange how trauma lingered in the body, not in wounds but in the spaces between breaths. Lily had nightmares at first. She would wake in the middle of the night, gasping, her small fingers gripping the sheets. "It was so dark, Mommy," she'd whisper. "I couldn't find the top." Emma would hold her close, feeling the tremor in her daughter's heartbeat. "You're safe," she'd whisper back again and again, like a spell meant to ward off what memory refused to forget. Every time the wind shifted toward the lake, Emma's chest tightened. She stopped painting. The easel stood abandoned on the porch, covered in a fine film of dust. She couldn't bear to paint the water, or anything at all. The world, once vibrant with light and color, had faded into muted grays. Rex came every morning, even while healing. His limp was barely visible now, but the rhythm of his breathing had changed, slower, heavier. Hank said it was from the infection, that the lungs never fully clear after something like that. But Emma believed the dog had carried something heavier than water back from that lake. Something spiritual, something that bound them forever. Lily would sit with him for hours. Sometimes she'd read stories out loud, her voice soft and serious, as if the dog understood every word. He'd rest his head in her lap, eyes half closed, tail sweeping idly against the porch boards. Emma would watch from the doorway, and sometimes she'd cry, quietly, because that image of love felt like redemption itself. But there was another undercurrent in the town: guilt. People began stopping by uninvited, leaving pies, casseroles, letters. The woman from the café who had heard Emma's screams that evening but didn't go, she brought flowers and broke down crying on the porch. "I thought someone else would help," she said, voice cracking. "I thought it wasn't real." Emma didn't know how to respond. Part of her wanted to say it was fine. That forgiveness was easy, but it wasn't. That night had carved something raw into her. She looked at that woman and saw not malice, but the reflection of her own past silences, the times she had ignored others' cries, too consumed by her own pain. So she just said softly, "You would have done it if you knew." The lake became a symbol in their small community, both wound and shrine. Teenagers stopped swimming there. Parents told their children the story of the dog who saved the little girl, using it as a bedtime lesson about courage. Hank told it differently at the local diner, not as hero worship, but as a warning about complacency. "Sometimes," he'd say, "God sends help in fur when man won't move his feet." Rex became something of a legend, though he never seemed to notice. He still chased the mailman, still barked at the occasional raccoon, still slept curled beside Hank's porch steps. Heroism hadn't changed him. It had only revealed what was already there, loyalty in its purest, wordless form. One autumn morning, a chill crept through the air, turning the lake silver. Emma found Rex sitting at the end of the dock alone, his breath clouded in the morning mist, eyes fixed on the water. Lily ran down the path toward him, scarf trailing, laughter echoing across the quiet.
Come on, Rex,
she called.
race me.
He turned, wagged his tail once but didn't move. Emma walked slower, sensing something strange, a stillness in him she hadn't seen before. His gaze wasn't empty. It was distant, like he was remembering. When she reached him, she knelt beside him. "You okay, boy?" she whispered. He looked at her, and for a moment the reflection of the lake shimmered in his eyes. That endless, haunting blue. She scratched his ear gently, and he leaned into her hand. Lily was picking wildflowers nearby, humming. The sun broke through clouds, scattering light across the water. Emma felt the warmth on her skin, soft and golden, and something loosened inside her. She realized she wasn't afraid anymore. The lake no longer looked like the place she almost lost her child. It looked like the place she learned what love could endure. That night, she dreamed of Daniel. He stood at the edge of the dock, barefoot, smiling. "He's done his part," he said. "Now it's your turn." When she woke, tears were drying on her face, and dawn was bleeding pink through the curtains. Over the next few weeks, Emma began painting again. The first piece was of Rex, not in motion, not heroic, but quiet and resting, eyes half-lidded, bathed in morning light. She titled it The Listener. When she displayed it in the town's small library, People stopped in front of it and went silent. Some cried. Some just stood, remembering the night their world shifted. But everything changed again one cold November morning. Hank came knocking on Emma's door, hat in hand, eyes rimmed red. "He's not doing too good," he said. Emma's stomach dropped. She followed him across the yard, heart hammering. Rex was lying by the fireplace, chest rising shallowly. Lily knelt beside him, whispering, "It's okay, boy. You can rest now." Emma felt her knees weaken. She placed her hand on his side, feeling the faint rhythm of his heart. It was steady, then not. Hank's hand trembled as he reached for the dog's collar. He waited. He murmured, tears slipping down his weathered face. "He waited for you to come." Emma pressed her forehead to Rex's fur, breathing in that familiar scent. Pine, smoke rain. "Thank you," she whispered. "For everything." Lily climbed into her lap, crying quietly. "Will he see Daddy now?" she asked. Emma nodded, unable to speak. "Then he won't be lonely," Lily said. The fire crackled softly. Outside, the wind stirred the last of the leaves, sending them tumbling across the grass like small, fleeting souls. The town mourned him like they'd lost one of their own. At the ceremony by the lake, they placed his collar on the new oak post beside the sign. "The shepherd who listened." Flowers surrounded the base, and children left their favorite toys. Even the cafe woman came, placing a small bowl of water there, whispering, "For when he gets thirsty on the other side." Emma stood beside Lily, holding her hand. The lake shimmered, still, peaceful, forgiving. She could almost see him there, standing at the water's edge, looking back one last time before running toward something bright. As the crowd drifted away, Emma whispered to the wind. "You heard her when even I couldn't." The words trembled, then disappeared into the air. When they returned home, Lily hung Rex's old tag by her bed. Each night, before sleeping, she'd touch it and whisper, "Good night, Rex." The seasons turned again. Spring returned with its quiet miracles. Flowers breaking through frost, robins singing at dawn. One morning, Emma woke to the sound of paws on the porch. For a second, her heart leapt, but it wasn't Rex. It was a puppy. Hank stood at the gate, smiling faintly. "Found him wandering near the trail," he said. "Figured maybe he found you instead." The pup had Rex's eyes, that same steady amber, that same stillness that felt like home. Lily squealed, wrapping her arms around him. "Can we keep him?" Mommy Emma hesitated, then nodded, tears welling. "Yeah," she whispered. "We can keep him." That night, she painted again. Not the lake, not the storm, not the loss, but the small flicker of light that follows it. She painted the puppy sleeping beside Lily's bed, moonlight brushing their faces, and in the background, faint and spectral, the outline of a German shepherd watching from the shadows, still listening. The world moved on, as it always does. But some nights, when the wind came off the lake just right, Emma swore she could still hear the faint echo of that night. A bark cutting through the dark, the sound of courage in its purest form, and she would whisper to the silence, to the wind, to the memory that never faded, "You were the one who didn't look away." The town changed after Rex died, though not all at once. It was a slow turning, the kind you only notice when seasons blur together, and suddenly the air feels different. The sign by the lake weathered through winters and summers, but people kept it clean. Kids began leaving pebbles there, small tokens polished by the water. Tourists who'd never met Emma or Luli still stopped to read the carved words, tracing the letters like they were a prayer. For Emma, the years folded quietly. She opened a small art studio near the main road, a converted shed that smelled of cedar and linseed oil. Locals started bringing her old photographs of the lake, asking her to paint them the way she saw it. Not as danger, but as memory. She always said yes. Each painting carried a trace of Rex somewhere in the brushwork. A shimmer of gold, a paw print barely visible in the reeds. A suggestion of movement where the water met the light. She never pointed it out. She didn't need to. Those who looked long enough always found it. Lily grew. Her hair darkened, her laugh stayed the same. She never forgot that night, but time softened it. When her school asked students to write about the bravest soul you've ever known, she wrote about a dog, not as a hero, but as a listener. He didn't wait to be told. She wrote in neat, slanting letters. He just heard. Her teacher framed it on the wall, where it stayed long after she moved to the next grade. The lake itself seemed to mellow. It no longer looked haunted. Fishermen returned, so did the children. Cautiously at first, their laughter hesitant. Emma sometimes watched from her porch, brush resting against her lips, wondering what Rex would have done if he could see them. Probably nothing, she thought. He would have just stood there, tail wagging, keeping watch the way he always did, quietly, faithfully, as if his very presence made the world steadier. Hank grew frailer as the years went on. His hands shook more, his gait slowed, but his eyes still lit up whenever Lily came to visit. She'd bring the puppy, now a broad-shouldered shepherd with Rex's same calm gaze. And Hank would say, "You again, huh?" You carrying his torch. The dog would tilt his head, tail sweeping the floor, and Hank would chuckle. Good boy. Keep them safe. Every year on the anniversary of the rescue, the town gathered by the water. It wasn't official. No one planned it. People just came. Some brought flowers, others just stood in silence. The first year Emma couldn't speak. She only watched the reflections and held Lily's hand. The second year, she brought one of her paintings, a gift to the town. It showed the moment after the rescue, when the water still rippled but the sun was breaking through. In the corner, she had written a single line, "Sometimes silence just waits for someone brave enough to hear." By the third year, it wasn't a tragedy they remembered. It was a beginning. The local school started a program called Rex's Rule, teaching kids that courage often looks like listening. Volunteers cleaned the lake, planted trees along its edge, and built a small wooden bench beside the sign. People called it the shepherd's seat. It became a place for quiet confession. Teenagers came there after fights with their parents. Widows brought coffee and sat with their loneliness. Travelers paused there reading the plaque, some leaving with tears, others with small, private smiles. Emma came often in the early mornings, before the world woke. She would sit with a thermos and her sketch pad, the mist curling over the water, the sound of ducks gliding through the reeds. Every time the wind stirred, she imagined Rex trotting beside her, his shadow slipping into the fog. When Hank passed away one winter, Emma found among his things a small box wrapped in cloth. Inside was Rex's collar, polished clean, and a note in the old man's uneven handwritings. He chose right that night. You keep telling them why. She placed the collar on the shelf of her studio, where the sunlight caught the metal just right at dusk. It stayed there for years, a quiet reminder that bravery doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just listens, breathes, and leaps. Lily was 12 when she asked if she could swim again. Emma froze, brush midair. "The lake?" she asked, voice almost breaking. Lily nodded. "I think he'd want me too," she said softly. The words were gentle but carried weight. That summer afternoon was warm, the air heavy with pine and pollen. Emma stood at the dock, heart hammering as Lily stepped into the shallows. The dog, the new one, though by now he wasn't new at all, waited beside her, tail twitching. For a second, Emma's body flashed back to that day. The scream, the splash, the cold. But then Lily laughed, that same bright laugh she'd had as a child, and dove under. When she surfaced, she shouted, "It's not scary anymore, Mommy!" Emma smiled through tears. The fear that had lived inside her for years broke apart like glass under sunlight. The lake glimmered again, not as the place that almost took her daughter, but as the one that gave them both a second chance. That night, the two of them sat on the dock, legs dangling over the water, stars reflected in their eyes. The dog lay behind them, chin on his paws, watching the night. "Do you think he knows we're okay?" Lily asked. Emma looked out across the still surface, where the moon traced a silver path to the other side. "I think," she whispered, never stopped knowing. The wind stirred gently, brushing their faces like a benediction. Somewhere, an owl called. The dog raised his head briefly, ears twitching, then settled again. Years would keep turning. Lily would grow older, leave for college, paint her own stories across other skies. The studio would outlast its first roof and its second. The town would forget parts of its own history, but not this one. Children still learned about the night when a mother screamed, when no one listened, and when one creature decided that wasn't good enough. Sometimes, travelers passing through would see a woman painting by the water, a big German shepherd lying beside her, and they'd slow down. There was something in the way she looked at the lake, calm, grateful, almost reverent. They'd ask, "Is that the place?" And she'd nod, smiling faintly. "Yes," she'd say. That's the place where silence ended. Time has a way of softening the edges of even the hardest memories. By the time Lily returned, she was no longer the girl who had screamed that night. She was a woman with lines near her eyes, a quietness in her step, and a small boy holding her hand. The town looked smaller now. The gas station had a new sign, the diner was gone, and the roads seemed narrower. But the lake was the same. It still shimmered in the late afternoon light, wrapped in that same gentle hum of cicadas and wind through pine needles. Lily parked her car by the old path, the one she and her mother used to walk. Her son Max hopped out before her, clutching a worn tennis ball. "You sure we can throw it here, Mom?" he asked, eyes wide with that brave curiosity only children have. She smiled. "This is the best place to throw it." They followed the winding trail until the trees opened into the clearing. And there it was, the shepherd's seat, still standing, though the wood had grayed and the plaque had dulled. Someone had planted wildflowers all around it. They swayed lazily in the breeze. Lily ran her hand along the bench, tracing the faint letters. For Rex, who listened when no one else did. Max tugged at her sleeve. "Who's Rex?" She crouched beside him, smiling softly. "He was our dog. A very good one. Was he brave?" "The bravest," she whispered. She told him the story. Not the tragedy, but the part that mattered. How a dog had once heard something no one else could. How he'd jumped into the cold, dark water. Not because anyone told him to, but because love told him to. Max's eyes grew wide, and for a moment, the afternoon light caught his face the same way it once had caught hers when she was a child. "Can I throw one for him?" he asked. Lily nodded. He wound his little arm back and hurled the tennis ball into the lake. It splashed and bobbed, sunlight dancing across the ripples. For a moment, everything was still. Then, from the trees, a shepherd dog, grey around the muzzle but strong, trotted forward, barked once, and leapt into the water after it. Lily froze, her breath caught, not from fear, but from recognition. The dog's gait, the surety, the easy trust with which it swam, it was like watching memory made flesh. Emma had passed away years before, peacefully, paintbrush in hand, and the dog had stayed with Lily since. He was old now, slower, but his heart was still young. As he paddled back, dripping and proud, Lily knelt to take the ball. "Good boy," she said, voice trembling. "You did it." Just like he did. Max giggled and clapped his hands, and the shepherd wagged his tail, sending tiny arcs of water into the sunlight. Lily looked out over the lake. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she whispered, as if to the wind itself, "I brought him back, Mom. I kept the promise." The wind moved through the reeds, soft as breath. The surface of the water shimmered, and for a heartbeat, she thought she saw a shape beneath it. Not menacing, but calm and golden, moving with the rhythm of the light. She blinked and it was gone. But she smiled anyway, because she knew. The lake remembered. She sat on the bench while Max played by the water's edge, tossing stones and laughing every time they skipped. The dog lay nearby, chin resting on his paws, tail twitching whenever Max's laughter echoed. Lily took a small notebook from her bag, her mother's old sketchbook, the one she had carried for decades. Most of the pages were filled with watercolor sunsets, reeds, reflections, and always, somewhere, a trace of Rex. A paw print, a shadow, a streak of gold. On the very last page, her mother had written, "When love is real, it doesn't end. It changes shape, from bark to wind, from fur to light." Lily closed the book, tears blurring her smile. "You were right, Mom," she whispered. As the sun lowered behind the trees, Max ran back to her, breathless. "Can we come again tomorrow?" Lily brushed his hair from his forehead and nodded. "As many times as you want." They stayed until twilight, when the lake turned to glass and the sky poured itself into the water. The dog stood, shook off the last of the lake water, and leaned against Lily's leg. She rested a hand on his head, feeling his heartbeat, steady, strong, eternal. And then, as the first stars appeared, something remarkable happened. From across the lake, a faint echo, a bark, distant, gentle, impossible. The dog lifted his head, ears twitching. Max gasped. "Mom, did you hear that?" Lily looked out, eyes glistening.
Yes,
she said softly. "He's still watching." They stayed until the sound faded into night, until only the crickets and the water remained. And when they finally left, the wind moved through the tall grass like a sigh of gratitude, as though the land itself remembered the night a shepherd broke the silence, and the love that never truly left the water. The lake never truly forgets. Seasons pass, leaves fall and regrow, but the water remembers the moments that shaped it, the moments when courage appeared unbidden, where no one expected it. Lily returned years later, no longer the frightened little girl who screamed into the void, but a woman carrying both memory and gratitude in her heart. She walked slowly along the familiar path with her own son, Max, holding his hand as he scanned the water with wide-eyed curiosity. The shepherd's seat stood quietly at the lake's edge, worn by sun and rain, but still strong. Lily knelt and traced the carved letters with her fingers. For Rex, who listened when no one else did. She told Max the story as she had once been told, the story of a dog who didn't wait for permission, who leapt into danger simply because love commanded it. Max listened, rapt, imagining the courage it must have taken. A breeze stirred the reeds and lifted the hair at Lily's temple. She could feel more than see the presence of that loyal companion. She could picture him in the water, eyes steady, dragging her to safety, hearing her screams when the world looked the other way. And in that instant the past folded into the present, gentle and whole. Max tossed a ball into the lake, laughing as the dog they had brought home after Rex bounded in to retrieve it, reminding them that bravery and love were not lost, only transformed. Lily watched him play, her heart full. She felt the pulse of the lake beneath the shimmering surface, the soft echo of a bark, faint but unwavering. And she knew that Rex's courage had not left them. It lingered in the air, in the whisper of the wind, in the gentle ripples that danced across the water's mirror. She opened her mother's old sketchbook, the pages still filled with images of the lake, the reeds, and always traces of Rex. A paw print here, a golden streak there, reminders that love and loyalty endure beyond fear, beyond death, beyond the silence of the world. She smiled through tears and whispered, "You were right, Mom. He never left us." As dusk fell, the sun set the lake ablaze in molten gold. The dog lay beside Lily's feet, tail flicking, breathing steady. Max clutched another ball, eyes bright with wonder. And somewhere from deep within the heart of the lake, a faint bark echoed once more, soft as wind through pine. A promise that courage persists wherever it is needed. The night settled, stars reflected in the still water, the lake holding memory like a heartbeat. Lily leaned back on the shepherd's seat and closed her eyes. In the silence, she could feel every act of bravery, every quiet moment of listening, every leap of love that had saved a life, preserved a family, and transformed a town. The world moved on, as it always does. But for those who remember, who listen, who dare to act when others hesitate, the lake carries their story. A story of fear overcome, of life reclaimed, and of a German shepherd who answered a scream when everyone else ignored it. And in that quiet, infinite moment, Lily knew the truth: courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it waits, silent and steadfast, until the right heart finally hears it.